Hello, Earthlings, and thank you so much for tuning into this next Kismet broadcast. I'm going to start off with introductions, and then we'll roll into our conversation. My name is MJ Woods. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Kismet Mag, a liminal little speculative fiction zine that does its best work with other people in between arts and politics. I have the absolutely distinct pleasure of getting to chat today with Chuck Tingle. Chuck Tingle is the USA Today best-selling author, as well as a two-time Hugo Award finalist. Bram Stoker Award nominee, Goodreads Award nominee, Golden Poppy Award finalist, and Audie Award winner. He's a mysterious force of energy behind sunglasses and a pink mask, as you can see. He's also an
Yes.
anonymous author of romance, horror, and fantasy. Chuck was born in Home of Truth, Utah, and now lives in Los Angeles, California. Chuck writes to prove love is real, because love is the most important tool we have when resisting the endless cosmic void. Not everything people say about Chuck is true, but the important parts are. Chuck, thank you so very much.
Yay. What a dang intro. Thank you.
Oh, um, I'll start with the easy question that I ask everyone because I really like to know because it's like as a bookseller and a book lover, I like it's yeah. What was your gateway drug to the world of the speculative?
Oh, wow. Okay. You know what? This is already a huge can of worms because I try there's a reason that I say this. You are absolutely not supposed to say as a writer that you don't read very much. And the reason and I don't. And the reason that I actually say this is for a lot. I think there's a lot of you'll see like kind of advice things in various art forms that will say like if you want to do this, then you have to do this.
Mm,
And I come to this as an outsider, and
mm,
uh, I just want young creative buckaroos to know that there are so many different ways to approach art, and sometimes that can mean you are just obsessed with whatever your medium is. You dive in. There's a lot of very good artists like that, and then other times you can say, you know what, I'm going to admit to you, I am a pretty dang successful writer. I don't read very much. You are not supposed to say that, but I will. A lot of my influences are other mediums,
mm.
film a lot, different performance artists, different things like that. And I do love books. I love to read, but it's just not something that I get a chance to do very often. That's a really roundabout way of answering our question. I will actually give this is one of the rare cases where I do have a direct one because absolutely one of the first books that I remember reading as a young buckaroo was The Hobbit. So
Mm.
that honestly was probably, it's hard to say, especially at that age. I mean, I remember, I read that at an age where I probably didn't even understand, like very young. But I do think probably subliminally speaking, like that probably coded something in my brain for the fantastical, I would imagine.
Yeah. And what are so outside of books then? So horror, I mean, is like a big chunk of well, horror and like the monstrous, but like fun monstrous, weird monstrous, sexy monstrous. Where
Yes.
does that where did what pieces of media have sort of shaped that interest?
So I have broken down my influences into five buckaroos. Uh, I call them the Davids, the Andys, and the Jordan, because actually there's just they're doubling up on names. But that would be David Byrne from the Talking
Mm,
Heads is number one, especially as an autistic buckaroo.
mm,
Seeing him talk about being on the spectrum really opened a lot for me, and I just love the Talking Heads. So that's
yeah.
huge influence. Other David number two, that would be David Lynch,
Ooh.
who has written, but is mostly known for the film stuff. And then there would be the Andys. That's Andy Warhol, and Andy Kaufman.
Mm,
And then
mm,
finally Jordan, which would be Jordan Peele. So all of those buckaroos, titans in their field. And I definitely think if you know my work, there's like a through line to all of that, but none of them really known as
mm,
writers. I think really what a lot of my style that I have developed, the uniqueness of it is coming from like an outsider position, taking inspiration from all these kind of unusual things, not
Hmm.
necessarily writers. And I also think a lot of it is my love of like punk and of kind of seeing these rules. There's a lot of writing rules that are just laid out in front of us that everyone assumes, oh, well, you have to do that. I've been taught that by every English class since the beginning of time. And I will follow rules, but only if they make sense to me. And I find a lot of the rules of writing, including you should never say that you don't read very much. A lot of those rules just didn't make sense to me. So I think
Yeah.
a punk mindset is probably the biggest thing that cultivates this style.
Yeah. There's a really great moment in Lucky Day that I won't spoil for people. There's a good Chekhov's gun reference that I really enjoyed. And the breaking of that even, I was like, oh, this is very Chuck. Like as someone who's read a lot of your
Oh,
work, I was like, this fits the vibe of like, oh, screw that thing. Like
you know what is so funny? I'm so glad you said that because, writing these novels, it's a big editing process. Like
Yeah.
I've read that book. I don't read often, but I read my own books like 50 dang times. And that thing you are referencing, I almost took out because I thought I just thought like am I don't know. There was something about it that I wasn't sure. And then I
Mm.
every time there was one pass where I deleted it, and then I thought, oh, I miss it. I think it's really powerful. So I put it back in. I'm so glad you said that because that's like, I probably shouldn't even mention it. This is kind of boring process stuff,
No, no, no. That's
but
awesome.
I will say that of there's always when you're kind of working on these novels because when you release it into the world it's not
Mm.
yours anymore, right? It's out there, and there's kind of always, I think most authors have like one or two things that even when it comes out kind of hang over them, like they're not
Mm.
a sentence, like literally a word. Oh, should I have called it a castle or a keep? And it's like rattles around in your head for a decade. And that was, I feel like that was going to be one for me in this book. And you saying that you enjoyed it, I think you have just broken the spell that it had over me. So thank you.
Wonderful. No, I mean, I think it's this really, and I think you do this with a lot of your work. I follow you on like all the social medias, and I enjoy sort of some of the pushback that you often give people to on when they call it like they reference your works as like, oh, there's his Tingle verse, and then there's the normal stuff. And
Yes.
so like this pushback against like what is good writing, what is good craft, what is like normal writing. Like I love the pushback, and this felt like a very good like small version of that too, where like it's like
Oh, thank
there's this
you.
there's this narrative thing that we're all so used to, and like not doing that is, yeah. So I loved it. Yeah.
That was what it was intended to be. So I'm glad it resonated in that way. And I do find, yeah, it's really interesting how many of these rules that we just have without kind of sitting back and questioning, well, why? And
Yeah.
of all the, like, I guess I can understand, like, if I was a lawyer and this was a law podcast, I very much understand why you would want to follow some of those rules, right? But art, by definition, like what we are doing in art is
Mm.
defying these things. It's questioning like, well, can anything really be bad or can it just be
Mm.
different? And it's like outside of that, like I said, in law, or if I was an accountant or something, then sure, someone could say, well, yeah, and we could even debate that. There's plenty of debate you could have in an existential sense about that. But really in art of all places, I think people often say things like, well, it's subjective, you can't really rate it. They'll say that and then instantly basically forget that and turn around and start making all these claims and stuff. So yeah, I do feel like I spend a lot of time saying, well, wait a minute, this is art. What rules exactly are we talking about here?
Yeah, no. This spins sort of well into like the second question that I usually always ask people. And part of my want for asking it is because I find that in the mix of like book selling, book buying, book reading, or more broadly media consumption, we're really pedantic about how we talk about these things. And as a bookseller, I've started to die on this hill of like, why do we categorize some things as one thing and some things as another? So like, why is Margaret Atwood and George Orwell considered like literary fiction in most bookstores, and yet like Octavia Butler and Sam Delaney are in science fiction and fantasy? And so along those lines, how do you personally go about categorizing your work? Because sometimes it's not exactly how it gets marketed. So how do you think about your work in terms of like category or function?
Yes. Oh, that's a great observation. It's interesting because I think a lot of people who reach that thought, right? And it's a slightly more advanced way of thinking. I'm sure there's a lot of buckers that trot through life and don't really notice
Mm.
that, but you're confronted with it all the time and you're thinking about these things. And I think a lot of folks will reach that and then get frustrated and not take it to the next level. And I think that the next level is a sort of realization that everything, at least let's just narrow it down to art without getting too in the weeds, but everything in art is just kind of what you call it. It
Hmm.
is like everything can be everything else. It is entirely kind of perception outside of the art. And I think that on the surface level, a lot of folks are afraid of that. They say, well, then what does that do? My entire genre is ruined and everything. But I really think there's kind of a beauty to it. There's like
Mm.
so much to explore and to realize, like, oh, wow, now that it's almost like you're stepping outside of the frame. You've been painting on a canvas your whole life, and suddenly you realize, oh, and I get to pick the frame, you know, and I
Yeah.
get to I get to pick, is it a wood frame? Is it a big brass frame? And then you think, oh, and I get to pick where it's hung. Now these are all metaphors, but kind of literally, where it's hung is what genre. Like, what am I going to
Hmm.
tell people that this genre is? Am I going to write a romance and tell everyone it's horror? And if people get disappointed, like, that in itself is art. What, like, there's so many more boundaries that can be broken or pushed or explored or manipulated artistically when you realize, oh, so much of what's happening is perception. I think
Mm.
I'm a really good example of that, actually. The way that my self-published erotica has been seen has completely changed. I always thought of it as a sort of like a experimental, like kind of literary type thing that I was doing that was very like Dadaist
Yeah.
abstract art. And I've been doing it for 10 years now. And the first books that I put out were seen as pretty much just the opposite of that, just utter slop. And I have insisted for years that there is thoughtful art behind them, and it has taken a long time, but like that perception has changed. And
Mm.
because of that, I think it's so interesting what, like, now when I put out a Tingler, the reactions that I get to it from the work I've done outside of the art, it is fascinating. It's beautiful.
Mm.
Just the way that like people are reacting to this kind of surrealist fantasy erotica, not with comments of, oh, it's so bad, it's good, or that, but mostly with comments of, like, this is really cute. This is
Mm.
fun. This is so exciting. Like there's still laughter, but it's much more excitement and joy from, I think, people who otherwise might not feel like they could explore these kind of outer reaches of sexuality.
Yeah.
So it's like a new toolbox.
Yeah, I revisited your Tinglers in preparation for this interview, and the one that I picked up and had to read because I read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep this year, and I was like, oh, I gotta read Do Androids Dream of Electric Butts, and oh my God, like I was cackling, like just with
Yes.
like pure delight because there's so many like the way you like pick apart the narrative and like reconstruct it in this very goofy way, and it's so delightfully goofy. There's like the scene where she first sees the opera singer, and she's describing her, and she's like, I don't know if she's a Sasquatch yet, and then she describes that she's like excessively furry and like has massive feet. I'm like, this is incredible. This is so
Yes.
funny. Yeah,
Yeah,
so I know.
exactly.
Yeah, I think it is. I love that like you engage with that discourse too, because I think a lot of people would shy away from this idea of like how people talk about their work and sort of more meta way. And I love that you engage with it frequently, like on Tumblr or on Instagram or wherever
Yes.
you're posting. I love that engagement because I think it doesn't help shape, but it helps add flavor that maybe some people would like not pick. I'm not a huge fan of Barth's Death of the Author because I
Yes.
think it lacks a lot of like you lose a lot of your nuance, and especially because like it only really works for white men. And the moment you start like getting rid of queer people or neurodiverse people or black people out of the stories they're writing, you lose so much. And so adding that in actively, like as an artist, has been really like
Yes.
I find it engaging.
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons why I can do that. I think one of them is that I, like you, like kind of believe that it's going to happen like you can't
Mm,
remove it. And so everyone tries to. There's so many authors and bless them because I get where they're coming from. But there are so many authors who you will hear this refrain, whether it's publicly or behind the scenes, of I just want to be a writer. I don't want to
mm,
have to do all this other stuff. And that is fair. But I always come back and say, you you kind of can't. Everything that you do will like shape the way that people read your book. And people say, well, what about you, Chuck? Like no one no one knows who you are. You're not, you're not projecting onto it. I say, look at me, I'm wearing a dang pink bag over my head.
mm.
Everything about me is
Yeah.
informing the way that people read these books. Even, you could even take a more like genuine, like kind of counter argument and say, well, what about an author that no one knows anything about, who's completely
Mm,
like remove themselves and they're this mystery? And then I would say, well, then everyone's going to be talking about the mystery. Everyone's going to read their
hmm.
book and discuss who it could be and all of that stuff. So it just, it is always there. And I think what I have decided to do is if it's going to be there, let it be a part of your art. Like let
Yeah.
it kind of start to swirl together and you can really it's almost like being a painter and like you open up a new brush kit or a new color palette and you realize, oh, there's like 8 colors here that I didn't even know existed. So it's very exciting, I think.
Yeah. I love it. Um, I've heard you a few times talk about this, and so I just want to like bring it into this conversation because I want the people who from Kismet who might not know you or your work to also hear this. Um, where does a story start for you? And I know that this is two different answers for your Tinglers versus your like Nightfire publication. So if you
Yes.
could talk about both, I would be intrigued to hear both again because I think
Yes.
it's so interesting.
Yes. So the Tinglers is that's the easy one to talk about. It is literally just, well, there's maybe not. Now I'm talking about it. There's basically two versions of Tinglers. I would call them like a current events Tingler and a
Mhm.
traditional Tingler. These are all short form erotica, but a current events Tingler would be I just saw something on the news. Someone was talking about saying maybe it's a holiday coming up, I guess would be a current events, but like something in my life where I get a feeling about it, I have something I want to say about it, I'm gonna process it. And I process it through writing this erotic short story. And then within 24 hours, it's out on the internet. Like that is,
Mhm.
and I do see that, like I said, relating back to like punk as a sort of punk rock, we're not going to edit it too many times. I have said this many times, but I'll say it again. Writing is kind of the only medium where you can't do that, and I kind of reject that. I think in music, if you play guitar a little too fast, it's a little out of tune and a little too distorted. Everyone will say, "Oh, that's a perfect punk song." And if you do that in writing, everyone says, "Oh, that's wrong. You can't do that."
Mm,
So I kind of like to reject that with those. I see it as punk writing and I just get it out fast. And it's a really unfiltered version of just what I think about it.
mhm.
Traditional tinglers will kind of be like that, but it's more of an evergreen idea, like just a feeling that I notice. I have a little thing on my notes app of, oh, that feeling where you order first and then everyone else orders at the meal and then you realize that they all got better stuff and you want to reorder but the waiter's already gone, like just strange little moments of existence that I think, okay, I'm gonna translate that feeling and into like this erotica thing. So that is quick and that is easy for writing erotica shorts. You don't need the three, you don't need any beats or acts. You just
Mm.
need a problem and then you solve it with having sex. That's how you write short form erotic, essentially. And that's very fun. The way that I do my queer horror novels, because those are through a traditional publisher, they're going to take longer. I can't really process in 24 hours. It's a year, after turning it in before it will even come out. So this is slower. I have to make sure that I really want to write the idea that's in my head. And so what I do is I have, I would say, like two buckets in my brain at all times. The first one is high concept ideas. High concept ideas are people think that it means like flighty and abstract. It's actually not. It's very solid. In filmmaking, a high concept idea is something that you could sell as a movie pitch without a star attached. That's
Mm.
basically where the term comes from. It's something like they generally are kind of ironic. The golden example that I always use is Liar Liar is a movie about a lawyer that can't lie for 24 hours. They essentially sound like a punchline, right? That's just,
Yeah.
and a lot of movies are like this. The really good ideas of like these scripts that just get written by kind of like a nobody and then blow up in Hollywood are generally these kinds of ideas. And when you start to think about high concept ideas, you'll go and see a trailer and think, oh, that's super high concept. Um, I like that because I don't know, that's just kind of the way my brain works. So I have this bucket on this side of high concept ideas for horror novels. And then over here, I have things that I like, messages that I really care about. Things that I want to say, things burning in the depths of my soul. These will come
Mm.
and go and change. And then I have my morning walk. It's generally I trot up the hill for about an hour and I let these ideas bounce around in my head. And every once in a while, two of them will crash together when I will realize, oh, this thing that I really care about that's burning in my soul, this message that I want to deliver is the perfect idea for this high concept idea that's been sitting over here. And the second those things crash together, then I realize, oh, that's something that I want to write. So I just I have these bouncing around all the time, and then every couple of months or whenever I need it, they will crash together, and I will go, okay, that's the one. Lucky Day, really good example. I had my high concept idea, which was kind of like harnessing the power of bad luck, like horror about bad luck. There's
Hmm.
people that have tried it, but I don't think it has really. There's nothing that's really solidly been done about it that I can remember. Maybe I've missed it, but it's rare. It's hard to find stories about that. But specifically like this supernaturally lucky casino that is kind of manipulating luck
Hmm.
as a force. Had that for years. I thought that's super interesting. And then I was personally like kind of dealing with some like bisexual gatekeeping type stuff and
Mm.
feelings about that and feelings about when bisexuals like myself, I am bi, are told that they don't exist. And kind of really what actual nothingness is versus oh, you don't exist. Such a ridiculous thing to say.
Hmm.
And so I realized, oh, the kind of pieces that are missing from each of these sides, when they crash together, they create a really powerful story
Yeah.
with both a message and this really fun high concept idea. So that's how that came together. But all of my horror novels basically came together like that.
It's fun that you have such distinct processes with that too. I think there's not many authors these days because I think a lot of people. I mean, you were on. I listen to V. Schwab's podcast frequently, and I think so many people on there, or like in general in the writing world, have like they have a process they've built out to like make sure they can crank out the same thing. And because you have such distinctly different forms, I think that range of process is also interesting to discuss. Um,
Yes, yes, I think so too. And I think that like because I keep it even within that, they're kind of loose. Like a high concept idea, that's pretty broad. And it's
yeah.
something that I feel emotional about. That's pretty dang broad. So it lets me have a style, but it also doesn't really confine me too much.
Yeah, yeah, it's cool. It's yeah, because I think there's like yeah, and there's also the rules about process too. I think yeah, you're just so interesting to me in that regard because there is often so much rule about process and things like that. Like, are you a prancer or are you a
Oh,
yada yada
sure.
yada?
Yes,
Like, and
yes.
I think you sort of break the mold in that very punkish way in that way also. So I have a more fun, weird question for you because I can't help but notice this, and
Oh, I love it.
so like you're in the Tingleverse, obviously, there's lots of metatextual references to other Tinglers. I mean, for
Yes.
myriad reasons, either like in the way that they all exist in an RPG now, take TTRPG or TTRPG now, or just because like there's myriad overlapping things. But I've noticed too that with your Nightfire books, you've started to overlap them as well, where there's references
Yes.
to Camp Damascus and Bury Your Gaze, or references to like there were some references in Lucky Day to some of the other books. Are these both connected? Does the Tingleburst overlap with the Nightfire universe?
So the way that I
Um,
look at it is like, it's so funny to talk about because this is so theoretical and it sounds so like far out and existential, but I do actually like believe this, in kind of like the metaverse theory. It's funny because of like Marvel, everyone kind of thinks that this is like a new thing, but this is like has been around forever, first of all. And second of all, like theoretical physicists most believe like this is a pretty well-founded theory that this
yeah.
isn't actually like a way that the universe works with like quarks disappearing and kind of like there's all these different things. So I've always been fascinated by that. The implications of that are just overwhelming. And so the way I always looked at the Tingleverse is there's the erotic Tingleverse where all the stories, not all of them, but a lot of them kind of like overlap with not only themes, but like kind of characters weaving through or different things. And I look at it like let's say timelines on a stack. It's like this infinite stack. And when you say an infinite stack, it's kind of hard to even imagine because infinite is hard to imagine, but every permutation of things that could happen in this stack. And the Tinkleverse is written in like a close section of that stack.
Mm.
And then I would say the Horde Tingleverse is another section of that same stack that's kind of far away, but there are threads of it that kind of weave through the other. So it's kind of like two balls of yarn that are like on opposite sides of the room, but there's like just a couple of threads that have like weaved through and tied them together. And I like that just because I think I mean, honestly, for lack of a better answer, I do think it's just fun. It's like really
Yeah.
a fun, exciting thing. And if you're a fan of like a world, I think it's really cool that you can go into a book and like kind of like feel like you're existing in there. It's just
Mm.
really a great artistic thing. And also because I write so far ahead, not only can I reference books in the past, I can reference books in the future. So like Camp Damascus, it's funny because Lucky Day's not out yet, so not many people have read it. So you
Mm.
haven't been able to like talk about it or note these things, but Camp Damascus directly references Lucky Day. There's a character that has a poker chip from their mission trip to Vegas, and it's from the casino in Lucky
Oh my
Day.
God.
Yes.
I read Camp Damascus so long ago. I didn't make that connection. So,
Yeah, so well,
uh,
nobody would, of course, because they read it and then you're not going to remember like this rain. You're probably just going to think, well, that's kind of a weird thing to say. So I like to like I can plant these things earlier because I kind of work so far ahead, and then
mm,
it's fun to go back. I think I have a pet peeve about kind of like weaving worlds together when you start to notice that they only go forward. Like
mm,
or I guess they only go backwards. So like your third book is referencing your first, but then you always think,
mm.
well, where were all these people like during the first one? Why is this only going back in time for references? Seems like not really planned. So I've gone out of my way to do that. Lucky Day specifically references Camp Damascus, Bury Your Gaze, straight and
Yeah, it does.
yes, and I won't say now, but it is almost a stealth sequel in a lot of ways. I mean, if you actually there's an implication there that explains some major plot points from a previous book. Won't say which
Mm.
one of the three that I just mentioned, but and then it also references next year's book, which is called Fabulous Bodies. So
Oh.
it actually like web wise connects to every single one, but anyone reading Lucky Day would read the Fabulous Bodies reference and think, what the heck is this? Which I've already gotten. I've gotten a lot of people saying, I can actually just say it on here because it doesn't entirely matter. But there's a reference to a musician who has a like a residency at one of the Vegas hotels, and they say,
Mm.
"Oh, that's America's Elton John," and that's like just a little thing. And people have read this, and they're like, "I don't know who this like what." It's kind of just this throwaway line that no one is registering, but that's like the main villain
Mm.
of the next book. So it's just fun. Like, I mean, what can I say? I love being able to do that.
And you answered my subsequent question, which was why do you think we do? Because, and I think it is just fun. There's your talk about too about like the not weaving backwards. I think one of the examples I can think of where people have tried to do this, but like retroactively, is Marvel with
Oh
Sentry. I don't know if you know
yes.
the character of Sentry always makes me giggle, and they're using him now in the movies. But where like they tried to retroactively be like, oh, he was erased from the timeline. That's why he never existed. And then they made like Silver Age comics. They had people like pin Silver Age comics in the modern era. Like, yeah, I think of that pet peeve often. And Marvel's the only one that's like actively confronted and be like, we're sorry. Like here.
Yes. And you know what? Gosh, and they do it, and they also like kind of they at least do try. You're right. Like
Yeah.
there's certain things where you'll see and you'll be like, okay, I guess they were setting this up. The problem with them is that they change their plans so much that
Oh.
for everything that they set up for a future movie, there's like five that
Oh yeah.
just disappeared off into the web of the timelines.
Yeah, they give themselves so many outs.
Yes.
Okay, the next question is really big, but like, it's currently Pride Month, and as a one queer to another, I felt like I couldn't escape having this conversation because it was something that's been really crucial about your horror books to me. Um, and so the question is, so the language we use for queerness broadly is very complicated. It has, to me, sort of two descriptive purposes. On one level, there's the personal descriptive, where you're using it for yourself to describe to yourself how you fit into the world. And on the other level, there's the external descriptive, where you're using it to tell other people in some way what like how you fit into their world. Um, and your Nightfire publications all communicate something in that realm. There's the conversations of bisexuality and queerness. I think Straight has a ton of conversation right at the beginning about this that I found really interesting.
Yes.
And so there's two questions that bounce off of this long preamble I gave to this is one, why do you think the way we talk about queerness in the singular or plural setting is so important? And then secondarily, if you're to imagine a big, bright, beautiful future where language is working as best as we possibly can for this, what does that future look like for you personally?
Oh, this is great. Honestly, I think like what I've seen in the importance of queerness and like the term, right?
Yeah.
If we could take it back to like what I see a big success, not the only success, and other groups do this, like other marginalized groups do this, but as far as like queer buckaroos, a huge success in the queer community, I think, is in kind of the inclusiveness and like
Mm.
it's a dirty word. I apologize to you. It is almost the branding, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, and which is funny. I don't want to give away too many hints. The book after the ones I've been talking about is kind of about like the branding of queerness in a way, is
Ooh.
something that I'm kind of exploring. And over time, you've seen there's been all these changes to this. Like, the first
Mm.
pride marches to say like every gay man must be wearing a suit and tie. That's what they were demanding. And then kind of realizing like, okay, this sort of like purity politics kind of thing like is doesn't work. And like what really works is saying, okay, this is an umbrella. Everyone come in. We're gonna add more letters.
Yeah.
LGBTQIA, it's like get it all in here has been incredibly powerful. And
Hmm.
I think that because of that, when you start to talk about your identity, if I say like I'm bi, I also like have certain like feelings about gender and stuff. All of that stuff can kind of tend to get complicated
Hmm.
because it's like this particular marginalized group is like the United States, where it's like we've got like like 10 different states, right? But they're all
Yeah.
part of the same queer country. Um, and so what I like about queer is that you can immediately signify like we are related. We are like
Mm,
together, we are connected. Without having to like be like, and I'm from this state, but I like to travel to this state and I kind of sit on the border of this one. It's just like a really nice thing to just say, hey, we're on the same team. So that's
mm,
language wise why I think it's important.
yeah,
And as far as like the future that I would want to see for myself, I'm personally, I'm very happy where I'm at. I think
yeah,
the only things that I really have to deal with are kind of like different gatekeeping erasure type stuff because
yeah.
I am a hetero presenting relationship as a bisexual, and anyone in that situation knows what that's like. As a neurodivergent buckaroo, I am autistic. I'm incredibly good at masking. So it's like there's a lot of things that are kind of invisible for me. And
Mm,
I could say that I want a future where those are like less invisible, but honestly, I just can't complain personally about
yeah,
where I'm at. I'm like so happy with where I exist that I wish for other people, for their identities and their situations to be exactly what they dream of. I want to fight to make it so that they are
yeah.
there. But for me personally, I'm cruising, you know, whatever. It's like sometimes things get complicated, but for the most part, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I really loved as someone who's didn't grow up with the language because I grew up in a Southern Baptist household and had to learn that language. And I think so many of us are that way because we come to the queer community often and like we're growing up as an adult sometimes like there's so much growing that happens with like our identity and how we self-identify and how we communicate to other people. I think that like your books so often have those conversations about how we talk about it. Like at the beginning of Straight, there's a sort of like navigation of identities that happens. In this book there's the conversations between Agent Lane, and our main character that like navigate the idea of bisexuality and like how we use that word and why. Like there's a really frustrating moment with Agent Lane that I got very mad about, and I never forgave Agent Lane for the rest of the book about it.
Yes. Well, that
Like
part's very important. And I don't even think it's much of a spoiler because it's so part of the themes. But
yeah.
to have a theme of bi erasure, I think it would be very easy for me to write a book where, the main character, Vera, her mother says you're not bi, like the
Mm,
bisexuals don't actually exist. And for her mom, who as far as the narrative is concerned is like a cis straight woman, um uh for her mom to say that, I think that's an important point. But then for
yeah.
a queer character to say that to her, that's that's the point. That's the
Yeah.
real point, is that it's not just from the one side. It's like we have to tackle these issues for the complicated things they are. And a lot of the times it's the queer community turning back on itself and
Yeah.
attacking itself. And that's, we can't ignore it.
No, and I think those sort of that navigation of what is queerness and how we've navigated that branding is really interesting to me too in that regard. Like, thank God we're not the Madison Society anymore, who was, arguing for like queerness in the house only. Like I've like thank God for,
Yes.
and it's always been semantic, I think too, and that's part of the reason why I find your discussion so outwardly in the books interesting. So I had yeah, I think that the way we talk about queerness is going to continue to evolve, and I'm so excited to read these next two books because well, at least two books out because it sounds like that navigation of the queer marketing.
Yes.
um,
Well,
we'll hit.
you know what? It's an
Yeah.
interesting thing for me because, and this happens with art too. Like, to go back to what I said about artists, not wanting to kind of like be a brand, that I wish there was another word for it because it's such a dirty word. But
Mm,
really, you're just it is semantics again, where it's like you're just talking about how you express yourself outside of your art, and that too is art. It's almost like, don't let the people who misuse branding have it all. Like, seize control of,
yeah.
what is fashion, what are the clothes that you wear in the morning if not branding yourself? Like,
Yeah.
it's like kind of like this thing where I feel like we ignore it, we push it away like it's this dirty thing. The thing I want to explore in this future book is, the main character is like a marketing executive, and is not seen as the villain. And it's funny because I feel like I can actually I can get away with this simply because I've written 3 books where capitalism is ultimately like the real villain in a very explicit,
Yeah.
pronounced way. So it's almost like this next one is going to be me turning around and saying, okay, that is all true, but also like, you know, the way that like queer culture has been like this space of joy and a space where people have kind of said like it's almost like reverse branding where in the beginning they tried to brand it as like only suit and ties, queer, like not like don't get too sexual at pride, all this stuff, there's all
Hmm.
these like purity things, and it's like actually the reason why, not the reason, a big reason that queerness kind of has like been accepted overall is because people are free to just like express themselves. That
Yeah.
expressiveness is great. It's good branding, for lack of a better term. So that's kind of what the book explores is like this very complicated thing of like,
Mm.
what is that? Because it is even me saying it right now, I'm like, gosh, I wonder if this can be misinterpreted. There's all these things about that. It's a really, it's like this weird gray area for some reason when it's really like, Buckaroo should be taking a victory lap of how,
Yeah.
like, have you been to Pride? It's amazing. What an incredible, like, a Pride parade is mind blowing and
Yeah.
so fun and so beautiful and full of joy. I feel like queer Buckaroos should accept the victory lap in a sense of being like, we've all done a really good job. Like it's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah, yeah, no, I just love that. I'm just gonna say I love that because I think
Yeah.
it's great. Um, so Lucky Days sort of urges us not to let the bad that sometimes feels unpredictable and meaningless keep us from living truly and deeply or loving truly and deeply. It asks the reader to shift from the more and more present nihilism that we're seeing people sort of leaning towards these days to the more delightful cousin of nihilism, which is absurdity. How do you think that this book suggests ways to shift that perspective? And what are some ways that, like tools that you would tell people to help shift that perspective? Because I feel like your work is a lot of the absurd. I feel like if
Yes.
anyone can give suggestions on how to implement more of the absurd in daily life, so we don't get beat down by like the bad, I think it's. Well, and maybe I'm putting too much pressure on you,
No, no,
yeah,
absolutely. I mean, you might be, if not for the fact that that is the fundamental question of this book. So
yeah,
I've already spent a couple of years thinking about this, and I would actually say this is kind of the fundamental question of my career, of like the
yeah,
art that I make. Uh, uh, Lucky Day is a bit of a, I mean, it's a huge existential swing. It is, if you actually like set out the topics that Camp Damascus tackles, that Barrier Gaze tackles, like,
mm,
um, and then you jump to Lucky Day, you're suddenly like, oh my gosh, we are out in cosmic space. We're like just floating existentially. And I was worried about it. I
yeah,
really, when I wrote it, I literally thought, okay, well, the publisher, I have these multi-book deals. I'm already contracted for 3 books after Lucky Day, so I'll be fine. But this is going to be the one that maybe the Buckaroos don't like as much. Like it's just
mm,
too, I just thought this is too out there. And I still want to do it because this is that's not really how I decide on what art I want to do. But in the back of my head, I thought, okay, this might be the one that we get things cool off, and then I'll come back with the next one that's a little more grounded. And the results have actually kind of been the opposite in just the sense that like the reviews of this are very, everyone seems to really resonate with this, which feels good. So as the big swing, I do think I'm prepared a little bit to talk about it, at least for what works for me. I try to
hmm
shy away from like being like, you should do this.
yeah,
But I am happy to share what I do. And for me, I think the most powerful weapon that we have is gratitude. I really think like learning a gratitude practice
mm,
is super powerful because essentially, and this is what Lucky Day is about, we have all of these things that happen to us. We walk out of our house every day, and the day that we drive to work and get in a car wreck, we're going to remember it, right?
Mm,
And that's going to be the worst day ever. And with infinite timelines, infinite versions of how that day can go, there are literally infinite times that you walk out of your house and you get in that car wreck that you don't know about. You do not remember every day that you don't get in a car wreck. You just remember the day that you do. And I
yeah.
think actually like taking a moment to acknowledge that, and then if that car wreck happens, there are infinite versions of that car wreck where you and every passenger die. And
Yeah.
to come away from it and be sitting on that curb and thinking, oh my gosh, I am so mad that my insurance premium is going to go up. Um, to think that the version of you, the infinite versions of you that lost their life in that car wreck would give anything to be sitting on that curb just complaining about insurance premiums. And it's so easy in daily life to just forget about that. I started it's funny because like a lot of people come to that through like spiritual practice, or they're older through like philosophy. For me, and I'm not trying to say I'm some super wise genius, it's just I guess it's just kind of the way it worked out. I got really sick when I was younger, and I remember very specifically thinking, being so sick and thinking, this feels terrible. How come I never how come I never thought about how good it feels to not be sick? And I would just lay there being so sick, being like, I would be give anything to have just a normal day right now. And when I was having those normal days, not a single time did I ever think, gosh, I'm so glad I'm not sick. So coming out of that, it really started a sort of gratitude practice that I think can be very powerful when you kind
Yeah.
of implement it into your own life.
No, I love that. Yeah, because and that sort of goes into that idea of like absurdity versus nihilism. You know, absurdity tells us that nothing matters, so the matter you ascribe to it is what's important. So that idea of like making sure to find the things that do matter to you and the things
Yes.
that have had added like good purpose and meaning to your life and being aware of them, especially in the midst of like the world is topsy-turvy these days.
Yes.
To be aware of them in the present is very difficult. And so to make a practice of that is super, super, yeah, yeah.
Yes.
I love that. Um, so you do a really an incredible job of not letting the reader be happy with an easy ending. In Bury Your Gaze, you push the reader past where most people would expect the book to stop to interrogate the ideas of representation even further. And in Lucky Day, you take sort of the moral center of the book, and I don't again, I don't want to spoil things, but you take like somewhat of what I see some of the moral character of the book, and you unseat it towards the end of the book yet again destabilizing a world in the book that's already really destabilized. How do you hope readers in these sort of situations like Bury Your Gaze, Camp Damascus, but specifically in Lucky Days, work past your book? Because clearly
Yes.
you're encouraging them to work past it. How do you hope that people move past your book once it resolves at the end?
Wow, you managed to talk about that in a way that um really was spoiler free, and I am shocked. You did such a good job. Because if
Thank you.
I think I know what you're talking like the
Yeah.
specific moment, and yes, I would to extrapolate, I would say that in a book about absurdity, I tend to do these things where like I like to use the form of the book as a piece of the art itself. Like
Mm,
Camp Damascus is kind of pseudo written like it could be YA even though it's not, which is a little kind of confusing for some readers, but the reason for that is because like it's all about kind of this sort of like childhood kind of like stasis that the character is in despite all these adult things happening around them.
hmm.
But there's different things like that where I like kind of like to play with the form a little bit. And this one specifically, I will say for a book about absurdity versus nihilism, the way that things turn out for certain characters maybe might be absurd in itself is I guess kind of the point there. I think honestly, as far as like readers taking that away, I guess I would say I kind of take an approach of like, I don't necessarily know if they have to. Like,
Mm.
I do write message first. Like, that's my point. My point is to tell you something that I believe and to maybe like change your mind about something or anything. Another thing that writers are not supposed to say, but I don't care. That's what I do. Um, but the thing that comes along with that is the fact that it's also totally okay if you don't get that or if you disagree
Mm,
or anything. I think that the art, once I release a book into the world, it's not really mine anymore. It's
yeah.
the art is not what the text on the page. It is, a giant performance piece where I write this and someone else reads it, and everything that happens to them in between, the whatever they ate before they read this chapter, the mood that they're in, all of these different things. That's the piece. That's the art right there. So I don't really have any control over that. And so ultimately, I kind of think that I just have to be like, I've given you this, and I think a lot of people will interpret it this way. And if you interpret it that way, like then good job. That's your own thing. You have reclaimed it and you have turned it into a piece that I never saw coming, and that's really beautiful.
Yeah. Do you ever, this is just like a curiosity of like almost the industry, especially with Bury Your Gaze and Lucky Day, where there's these sort of dramatic shifts, right? Not shifts. No, they are shifts right at the end. Do you ever get pushback from editors saying like, oh, well, maybe we could like more easily resolve it this way or something like that?
Interesting. It is kind of book to book. My editor, and this is really nice. This is not typical, I will say, but because I had a pretty huge fan base when I got my book deal, and this is advice I would recommend to any artist is, um, do not come to a book deal or a record deal or a film contract like begging, thinking that you
Mm,
just won the lotto. You come to that as an equal partner. They are
hmm.
giving to you, you are giving to them, and you are reaching a deal. I think, I've talked about this a bit, but I will say it again. The epitome of this mentality is in the fact that one of the biggest shows in America was a show called American Idol, where you compete for a record contract without knowing what it was. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
that's true.
the fact that it's just a record contract, not a good record contract, not a bad one, but just a record contract really shows the mentality that like people think of these things from these corporations as lotto tickets.
Mm,
And you can see it actually with the way that show worked out is all of those artists were like that. It was a terrible deal.
yeah,
They would have been better off not signing those record contracts that were given as quote prizes. So when I, got my book deal, I approached it in the same way of not like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I would have been nothing without you. It was very much you guys are great. I'm great. Let's make something really cool together. And so because of that, uh, I have always been treated kind of like as an auteur writer. I think all artists kind of are in their own way, but there is something to be said for like working artists. And I'm not disparaging this at all, but you see it a lot with film and with books. But like with film, it's like there are some directors that they just can get hired onto a project and they make a perfectly good movie and they don't really have like this big stylistically thing. They just get the job done, right? And
yeah,
there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I think that I'm basically the opposite of that. Like I have a very specific style. And so the idea of Macmillan or Nightfire offering me this big contract and then making a bunch of notes on my books is just kind of absurd. Like they're
yeah,
paying a lot of money for me to be Chuck Tingle. They're not paying a lot of money for me to just kind of be another writer. So because of that, and because honestly, the people at Nightfire, this pains my punk rock heart to say, but it is true for a giant corporation, they are shockingly art forward. Like they really, it is so weird, but they really just like let me do whatever I want. It is astonishing. So I get notes. My editor is very good. Sometimes I take them, sometimes I don't. The ones that I take are genuinely pretty good, but overall, really not a lot of notes. It's pretty hands off and I'm kind of allowed to do basically whatever I want.
Wow, that's nice. Because that's I mean, I
Yes.
don't think that's the norm in the publish. I mean, like you said with like American Idol, I don't think that's how most people approach these sort of things. And also I don't think it's the norm in the publishing industry these days. Because at the end of the
No.
day, a lot of these companies are trying to make a lot of money.
Yes.
And it
That's
does
what
not
they're
benefit
built
them.
for.
Yeah,
Yes. I don't
exactly.
know
So
how I slipped into Nightfire, but they really like
uh
for now they kind of it's funny the really a great example of that is and because I make horror kind of the only pushback that I ever get about my endings sometimes is very kindly and gently. My editor has at times wanted me to make them like bad endings.
oh
And I am just because it's horror, because that's kind of
yeah.
like a part of the genre, right? And I'm like that no, like which is probably the opposite of most editors. They're like, hey, can't we have a happy ending for once so this book can dang sell, you know? Like your reviews will go up a whole point if you give everyone a happy ending. And for me, it's the opposite. It's like, this is horror. You sure you don't want to give it a little more tragedy? And I say, nope, this is my ending. I'm sticking to it.
And they've all been lovely so far.
Yes.
I look forward to reading many more of them. I have one final question for you, and it's also a question that I always feel obligated to ask, not out of like a bad obligation. The magazine is based here in Bloomington, Indiana, and we're the home of our unofficial poet laureate Ross Gay and his lovely book of delights and book of gratitude and things like that. He's one who frequently asks and talks about the ideas of joy and delight. And so, in the world that is currently very much on fire and very much not doing well in lots of ways. What are ways that Chuck Tingle finds actively seeks out and finds joy?
Wow. Okay. So we hit this briefly with like the gratitude practice. We don't
Yeah.
have to get into that again, but honestly, in a practical sense, like if anyone's listening and they practically really want to do that, literally just taking a moment and thinking about all the other versions of the day and just being like,
Mm,
okay, there's a version of this where I got in that car wreck and I didn't. And like just actively taking a moment to check in with what you have, to feel the sun on your face,
mm,
to have a human body that we're existing in, and to just be like, wow, that is unfathomably cool that I get to have a body. And like experience time and exist is kind of mind blowing. So that's like my really practical version. I would say for me, like if we really want to get like what are just some things that I'm doing lately, there is a vegan hot dog stand here in Los Angeles called the Frankenstand that I try my best to go to like every week, and they are horror themed vegan hot dogs that the stand is spooky. They kind of play spooky music, and there's this smoke that floats up. There's a little Frankenstein hanging over it, and every week they have a different like specialty thing. So like the Scarecrow is a really good one, and it's got like corn and all this stuff on it, and Swamp Thing is like their chili dog, and it's all vegan. So like honestly, it seems silly, but I guess that's the point, is like doing something silly is,
mm.
most weekends I try to just look on their Instagram. They move around, and I think I'm gonna drive over there and like get a spooky, silly hot dog. I think taking time out of your day to just like do something novel is
Mm.
incredibly potent. To just be like, you know what? I have never been to that park that's like 2 miles away from me. I'm just gonna go check it out. Something simply like that. I think if everyone did one novel thing, forget once a day. If they did a novel thing like that once a week, their lives would be just elevated in such a spectacular way.
I adore that hot dog stand.
Yeah, the Frankenstand. Any
Oh,
listeners, please follow the Frankenstand on Instagram. Find out where they're going to be parked because they're amazing.
oh my gosh. And also that's such a great suggestion too. The novel or the serendipitous or finding things that are kismet, like if something strikes you. I not
Yes.
to use the name, but finding kismet in the real world, in whatever way that can be, is lovely. So well, Chuck, this has been absolutely such a pleasure, and I really appreciate you joining us today on this kismet broadcast.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. This has been wonderful. I just have adored our conversation. Your questions were amazing, and I want to come back. So
Oh,
next time let's do it again.
yes, please. Yes, please. I
Yes,
will. I'll hit you up whenever the either of the new books come out, and we can chat about those
please.
too.
Please
Awesome.
do. Okay,
Well,
this has
thank you
been
so much,
wonderful.
and thank you so much to our listeners.
Yes.
Hello, Earthlings. It is I, MJ Woods, with one final note. That interview with Chuck was just so lovely. As a buckaroo myself, it was hard for me to believe I got to interview the one and only Tingler himself. If you aren't familiar with his works, please go seek them out. Especially go see the new Unlucky Day. It is a bomb in these rocky and rough times. As well, it's a single-handed takedown of nihilism by Mr. Tingle. Thank you all so much for being part of our community, and without you, this project wouldn't exist.